Hello, YouTube Ken. Welcome to my channel withKhiannaCalica. If you are new here, baby, that's all right because I'm new too. This is only my second video and I am so excited to be with you. If you missed my first video, I will share it. And in that video, I talked about my 40-acre miracle that God blessed me with. And I also shared a little bit of a surprise on, well, it wasn't a surprise to me, but it was a surprise for y'all, that I was expecting. Well, guess who made his appearance? My son has just turned a week old, and I could not be happier alongside my husband to just welcome him and to have spent this past week with him. So that brings me to this video. I am ready to share with y'all 7 things I did during my postpartum journey, or at least the first week. So let's get to it. For those of you who don't know, I found birth work. Some people use the term birth worker, birth keeper, or doula interchangeably, right? But it's the idea of holding space for expecting parents, for grandparents, for their family members, and just honoring that journey of conception, pregnancy, afterbirth, and everything in between. But let me say that even with all my work as a birth worker, all the births that I've supported, all the postpartum moms that I've served, there's something so humbling and equalizing about birth. So everything that I knew before, I felt like it went out the window, and it was like I was just having my own experience, which has made me all the more passionate about sharing with others why this information need not be held to ourselves. So diving into number 1, the first thing that I did postpartum, so I'm talking directly after birth, was indulge in very nutrient-dense foods, and later on throughout the week, culturally dense foods, warming foods. And what that specifically looked like for us, I'll kind of break it up for you in phases. So immediately after birth, let me say this. Had I given birth at home, which I really wanted to do, had I given birth at home, my postpartum meal would have looked different than what I'm going to describe. I did give birth at the hospital. And so what that looked like was I needed foods that were readily available that I could just snack on right away. That sure could be warmed, but most hospitals only have a microwave. And so for us and our family, oh my goodness, immediately after birth, I had watermelon, pineapple, and chicken and bone broth. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but let me just bear with me for a little bit. So prior to him arriving, I had been craving, throughout my entire pregnancy, I craved every bit of fruit. You name the fruit and I probably ate it. I even when not pregnant, love fruits and veggies, but particularly in the last week of my pregnancy, I was really craving watermelon, pineapples, and oranges. So I knew that my body really wanted vitamin C. So after birth, one of the first things that I ate was the watermelon and pineapple, and I love this. One, watermelon is so hydrating and it's high water content, right? So I really felt hydrated, refreshed after birth, especially for most hospitals. You're being able to hydrate orally is not necessarily acceptable. Not to say that I didn't do it, but your body is really yearning to be rehydrated. And so the watermelon did that for me immediately. And what we did, we just cubed it up and put it in Ziploc bags, and then we put it in a cooler. Side note to this, if you do that and you're taking home your placenta, that also is like a 2-for-1, right? So you have all the foods, hopefully you eat those foods, and then when it's time for you to discharge, you already have a cooler for your placenta. So just that's kind of like a little caveat. The pineapple is full of antioxidants, and both the watermelon and pineapple can also be great to suppress inflammation. So especially doing something like giving birth can take such a toll on the body. And so for me, I personally found that those two fruits were very, very enriching. The other part about that was, so after I hydrated from my fruit, I also had bone broth. My favorite bone broth that I was drinking during pregnancy, because I wasn't making my own, I was buying from the store, and it's Zoop broths. They don't sponsor you, girl, because it's only my second video, but I will shout them out regardless because it was so good. From what I know, they have a beef broth and a bone broth. Now this might be weird to folks, but I just drank it. Like my husband would at the hospital heat it up for me, and I just drank it like a tea. I didn't have to add anything to it. Now had I been at home, I probably would have added other spices too to make it rich, but for being at the hospital, it did exactly what I needed. And this serves a couple purposes. So having that hot liquid bone broth. Both bone broth from the marrow and the stalk is going to be very refreshing, going to be very healing as well. And also my body just engaged in something very rigorous. And so doing something like having something warming is giving my body an opportunity to heal. And then also post-birth, some people experience like constipation, or it's just really hard to pass that first bowel movement. It can be really uncomfortable for people, considering all the things that your body goes through. For me specifically, I'm talking about a vaginal delivery. And so having something warming, constantly massaging your intestines and your digestive tract, that can also make your bowels a little bit more tolerable after birth. So that's for one. So I mentioned nutrient-dense foods, and now I want to talk about culturally dense foods. And so I think it's really, your girl is passionate about food sovereignty, about preserving Black and Indigenous ways of life and our food systems and reclaiming our foods. Now, I want to talk about the difference between culturally dense foods and traditionally dense foods. So traditionally dense foods are things that are foods that were privy to our communities before colonization or before different integration with cultures. And so an example of that would be in Hawaii, their spam musubi might be a culturally dense food, but it may not necessarily be the most traditionally or nutrient dense food, right? Like spam wasn't indigenous to the Hawaiian people. But I will say what I have found is that if you balance your diet postpartum with nutrient dense foods, having culturally dense foods, so for me, like spam musubi and white rice, those things can also be, while they may not always be the best in large portions, they can be so emotionally enriching and so spiritually satisfying, so nostalgic. And so for me, I had an array of foods that were nutrient dense, traditionally dense, and also culturally dense, where I might usually choose a brown rice. There's something about when my mom makes white rice and chicken adobo that is equally as healing. So I also want to just touch on that. It's so important that in your postpartum journey, when you're selecting your foods, and also just throughout life, pick foods that make you feel whole and well. I think that we often go into foods thinking, what's the most healthy? But I don't think that's the most important thing. I think it's what makes me feel the most whole and the most embodied. Okay, we got my favorite part out of the way. Y'all, I'm a foodie. I love food. Okay, number two. Now, this may not be a fan favorite, so if you align with this, dope. If you don't, just do your own thing. But for me, it was no scrolling and putting my phone on do not disturb. And why that was important for me is I see birth as a ceremony, right? This opportunity to birth a human, which I still can't believe he's here with me. to birth a human and to emerge as a different version of myself. And while scrolling can be this opportunity to just kind of step outside of yourself, which can be awesome, right? You're like, I just gave birth. I just need to take an exhale and do something different. But for me, it was really important that, especially with him being my first child, I did not want to miss anything. And even that interaction with myself, I really just wanted to take that time of not getting distracted by social media and scrolling, but instead spending that time asking myself, like, yo, how do you feel? Like a human just came outside of you. Or just taking inventory, just breathing, just checking in with, now that's not to say that I didn't let family members know or close friends know. Definitely do that. This is such a moment to be shared. But as far as like answering unnecessary calls or emails, and y'all know your girl loves to work, okay? But this was the time for me to just rest and really practice a discipline of detachment from my phone, from social media, to give myself the opportunity to just like rest and recalibrate with myself, but also rest and recalibrate with this new person that I have been waiting, that me and my husband have been waiting to meet, and just savoring that moment, because y'all, this week went by so fast. So again, number 2, no scrolling. Put that phone on do not disturb. Listen, I'll be quick to let a phone die, okay? All right, y'all, number 3, what we got? Okay, this one I'm really excited about. So I actually made this decision before I gave birth, which had made it easier in my postpartum journey this first week. And that was the idea of observing the sacred 40. Some people call this sacred 40, some people call this fasting, but really just giving yourself 40 days to just be with you, your baby, and those closest to you. So I'm talking like, matter of fact, I'm not talking, you know who those people are, but really just setting that parameter. And I did it for a lot of different reasons. I did it for health reasons, of one, just wanting to give him the opportunity to just calibrate to the earth. But then also I did that for me because I know that I can be overly, right? Like I love people. I love to sow into people. I love to pour into people. I love to host people. And in this season of my life, as I emerge as a new mother, it was really important to me to just rest. And that's something that I'm actively pursuing, is resting as much as I nurture. So really just taking that time. And what is nice too is if you make this decision, whether that is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, only you know what's best for you and your family. But when you make that decision to just keep the sanctity of that container like just safeguarded, it is so much easier to communicate to people. So for example, I let those closest to me, like, hey, just to let you know, we're going to be observing a 40-day rest period after birth. I would love for you to meet him afterwards. Saying it preemptively helps folks, one, like get accustomed that this might be something. A lot of people don't practice that, and so getting them accustomed to that. But then two, as things come up, you already have kind of a boundary. Not to say that that boundary can't change if you are ready to do stuff before that 40 days. But for example, we had a couple barbecues already and birthday parties that we got invited to. And instead of me like racking my brain, like, oh, should I go? Should I not go? I don't know if people are going to touch him or want to kiss him or all those things. I didn't have to go through those mental gymnastics because I just already decided I'm not doing anything for the next 40 days. Now, another thing about that is I do want to acknowledge that that may not feel accessible to everyone. And the reason why I say feel, I want to be very thoughtful about that word choice, is sometimes we have to unlearn things to learn something. And for a lot of us, we have been trained that birth is nothing, right? Like you're supposed to birth and then you're supposed to go back to work, and that's that. I know that that is changing a lot now, but for some of us, we can't even fathom the idea of resting for 40 days, whether we think we're worthy of it, whether we think it's something that we deserve, or it could be so nerve-wracking for us that it's not even something that we desire. So I just say check in with yourself, see how that feels. But for us personally, me observing it has already made it so much easier. Okay, where we at? Number 4, observing bed rest, then taking personal inventory. So the first 2 days of my birth, after birth, I should say, I did not do anything. I was in the bed, and the only time that I got up was to go to the bathroom, and that's it. And then back to the bed. And so if this is you, I am really, really blessed that my husband is so supportive, so supportive. And he just was ready, but like, babe, what do you need? Now, if maybe this isn't the case for you, but maybe you have a deep friend in your life, or a sister or a brother or anyone, or a neighbor, someone that can be there for you. If there's anyone in your life that you would trust in a vulnerable time like that, please take them up on any offers to help you if that feels comfortable to you, because those first 2 days really gave my body the opportunity to eat all those nutrient-dense foods that I was talking about, and then not straining my body, really giving myself that rest. Now, the second part of that, right? So I observed bed rest, and then I took inventory of my body. And so this is the important part. So there's some called like the 5-5-5 rule. So 5 days on the bed, 5 days near the bed, 5 days around the bed. But you have to do what is right for you. For me personally, especially with all the things that we get to do at the ranch, we live a very, very active lifestyle. And so I was not able to sit in the bed for a week. So what I did was a gradual increase in mobility. So the first 2 days, it was just me in the bed, only walking to the bathroom. The next few days in this week, I then decided not to be in the bed, but to be in the living room. And then I kind of expanded it to the only 2 places that I would walk to would be the bathroom and the kitchen. And even then, so I was really intent about not being on my feet very long and really not taking any unnecessary steps. The next day, or I should say within the next phase, I started to do maybe a lap around the house. But very intentional about not over pushing my body, right? Especially being someone that loves to be active. I think it's a matter of really caring for myself. I wanted to be active without compromising my recovery time, right? So when we push ourselves prematurely, that actually hurts us more than that helps us. And so you'll just find what feels right for you. And then this also goes back to support. So I want to say something about the support and food, even though we already touched on that. Something that happened was that my mom and my sister came to visit, which was such a blessing. They hooked the freezer up, y'all. I have prepared meals for days that all we have to do is put those joints in the oven or yes, I did just say that, the crock pot. and then that's, boom, there you have it. They were also kind enough to clean for us too, so that way it was just a matter of maintaining. But there are a couple different options. There's pregnancy resource groups if you don't have anyone in your life that you feel comfortable letting do those things. There's also meal trains that you can set up. Your local women's clinic might also have resources for postpartum support. But if there is any way that you can get that support, and if someone is offering, as someone who has worked up on my receiving muscle, receive, receive. If pregnancy and birth have taught me anything, it's the importance of putting my pride aside to receive the help that people want to give, because it really does make the difference in your mental health, your wellness, and just holistically how you're showing up for yourself. And when I'm showing up as a better version of myself, I get to show up as a better version for my son. So, what are we at? We're at number 5, y'all. Remember your disciplines. So, there was a moment, I'd say probably day 5 postpartum. So day 5 of his life, where I was just like getting frustrated. We were in our nighttime. We were getting ready to wind down for the evening. And I just found that I was getting frustrated, and it wasn't him, right? He's just being a baby, doing what babies do. And I actually wasn't even frustrated with myself. I would say that I was like, hey, like, you're a new mom, this is what happens, like, you're just trying to figure it out. And what I realized was just the onset of frustration was coming up. And when I took a moment to acknowledge that, I realized that, I'm just out here shaking the camera. What I realized was that of course I was frustrated. Since I gave birth to him, had not engaged in any of my own disciplines. I had spent this week really trying to learn him and kind of do the dance of newbornhood and new motherhood. But I had to realize that I hadn't done my own devotionals. I hadn't done my nighttime routine. And so what I did as soon as I acknowledged that is I stopped. He was a little fussy, but he wasn't crying. But I gave myself that permission to step away from him for just a second. I went to the kitchen. I made myself some tea. I also cut myself a fat piece of carrot cake, and I enjoyed it. And then I did a devotional, like a quick 2-minute devotional, and then I went back. And in that time, it was a total reset, right? Of being able to engage in a practice that grounded me before he got here, and using it as an opportunity to ground myself while he's here, so that when I'm interacting with him and when he's interacting with me, it can be one that is peaceable. Not to say that frustration won't come up, that's so natural. And if there's any way that I can honor that frustration in a way that was healthy, and for me, it was like stopping, taking a moment away, and grabbing some tea. Oh, there he is. Yes, my love. Okay, number 6, kind of going off of that, right? Like engaging in your disciplines, know your grounding techniques, know what makes you feel centered. For me, I also realized that I wanted to take prayer pauses just for us. And that was a combination of, yes, praying over my son, just speaking declarations of truth and the Lord's promises over him and over me and our family, but also that looked like an opportunity to take a breath and reset. And 2 examples of that came up during this first week of postpartum are a couple moments of transition. So for example, when after he's just fed, or he is getting his diaper changed and he might be really fussy, instead of just like going to the next thing, oh, I'm changing your diaper, you're fussy, let me swaddle you, or let me do something else, or switch breasts, or try to feed you, or whatever it may be, instead of kind of moving with that energy, I would take an opportunity where he's fussy and put him on my chest, like so, whether it's with a wrap or without a wrap, and just breathe with him, right? Especially if you were doing any breathing techniques while baby was inside you. Babies remember those things. And so I would always just take that as a moment to prayer pause and just say, before we go to your feeding, like, what do you need? Or, hey, calm down, we got this. And it may seem trivial in this moment, but what I can tell you is it worked for us as a family, of just taking that moment before we went from one thing to another to just hug, embrace each other, and then go to the next thing. And I found that it was effective every time. The other part of that, what that prayer pause also look like? I know in my last video I shared with y'all how much mental health and wellness means to me, and also just claiming victory for my mental health and realizing that part of my mental health journey was for me personally learning that I don't have to do everything alone, and that first and foremost I have the Lord to help me, the Holy Spirit to just fill me in moments where I need reprieve, and then of course like my husband and other support systems. But in the evening, so I'm talking like we've gone to bed, we're sleeping, now he's like waking up in the middle of the night, I would take a prayer pause, and before I touch him, before I'm like, the baby's crying. Nah, none of that energy. Like, well, let me say that. I didn't mean to say it like that, but because, right, you're going to have those moments you're like, why is he crying? I don't know what to do. But for me, it was like, nah, like I may not know what to do, but this is nothing new under the sun. And I pray that that doesn't come off in a tone of arrogance. But for me, it was just so important that I ground myself by remembering that no, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm a new mom. But what I do know is that women have been mothering for eons and that I'm no different from them. I just have to trust this process. And so when he's fussing at night and it's time to like wake up in the middle of the night for a diaper change or a feed, I simply say this prayer: Lord, not by my own might. Not by my own might, meaning that when I get up to change my son, when I get up to tend to him in the late hours of the evening or early morning, I don't have to do it in my own might. I can call on the Holy Spirit to give me a refreshing so that when I do it, I'm doing it from a place of rejuvenation. I'm doing it from a place of wellness. And that's not to say that I still won't be tired, but there's just a different energy behind it. The other part of that too is my husband is, again, so supportive. And one of the ways that he is supportive is that he is going to work every day. And in him going to work, he usually gets up at 5 a.m. So every family will have their own system, but something that is important for me is that as equally as he's ready and excited to support me with our son and anything that has to happen in the home, I'm also equally excited for him to be able to have a good night's rest, so that way he goes to work in high spirits and with good morale and well rested. Now we both have been so tired during this week, but instead of it being like, hey, you didn't get up with the baby, or I'm always getting up with the baby, it's nothing like that. It's not by our own might. So I don't necessarily have to call on my husband. I can call on him. He's always there, ready to help, ready to support. But I take a moment to call on the Holy Spirit first to refresh me, to see what I can do for our son while my husband rests. And then if I need to call him be my husband, I can. But that's just a way to think about team playing during that first week of postpartum. Now, if that may look different for every family, whether you both get maternity leave, paternity leave, or some type of leave for your family, also knowing that that leave may not be accessible to everyone, but just playing with the idea of what that looks like for you and your family. Okay, y'all, we're almost done with this video. And this last one, number 7, schedule therapy around your due date. Now, y'all know I'm a big advocate for therapy, right? I'm a big advocate for prayer, for therapy, for wellness, for wholeness, and everything in between. But I can tell you that for me personally, I could not have been more proud for 2 things. And I mentioned food earlier, but I just had so much more self-respect these days to be preemptive versus reactive. And I had scheduled a therapy session around my due date. And actually, let me say this, I got a therapist as soon as I found out that I was pregnant. And part of that for me was just knowing where my mental health has been in the past and wanting to make sure that I do my due diligence to be a thoughtful steward of my emotional wellness, knowing that pregnancy can be a very emotionally up and down thing. So I say that to say that when I had my therapy session during my first week of postpartum, I was so grateful, y'all. It gave me an opportunity and a space and container to process my birth and with a neutral setting. It also gave me a chance to create a cope ahead plan, and it also just gave me an opportunity to relate any anxieties I had about upcoming events, and just knowing that I had built that support system in for myself. So oftentimes we're like, oh, I'll get to that, or oh, that's just not a priority right now. Let me be the first to say that your wellness is always worth being prioritized. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. And I also like to tell people a couple of different resources that if you have state insurance, there are a lot of state insurances that cover behavioral specialist visits. There are also, if you find yourself, your local county usually has resource guides to 211. You can also call, I'm pretty sure that's a federal number, but you can call. Oh, hi, my love. You did so great during this video. You can call for the resources around that. So I know we went through them, some more than others, but I'm just so grateful that I got to share this postpartum, this first week with y'all. If there is anything that you want to know more about, let me know. Oh, and I also want to hear how your postpartum journey was, or if you supported a postpartum journey, how was that for you? I pray that you're well. I pray that you're whole, and I pray that you just have a week that leaves you refreshed and renewed.